Okay, so welcome to Custom Code the Drupal Way. Can everyone hear me okay without the mic? All right, cool. So I'm Matt Mendonca. If you'd like to follow along on your laptop, you can actually go to the website here and click Custom Code the Drupal Way. So that's how you can get the slides. So a little background about me. I'm an IT specialist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That's a generic title. I do web development. I previously worked at Fleischman Hillard and a small agency in Maryland. I've got about 3 years experience professionally with Drupal. If that sounds a bit small, I actually graduated college 3 years ago. And here is a quick day in the life of. Now, if you know standards and you know the internet, you know that that is a standard scale right there. Moving on. So, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about custom code the Drupal way. In other words, module development. We'll be talking about what modules are, why you should write modules, what makes up modules, the hook system, resources, questions, and we'll actually write some code at the end of it. Can't hear me? Okay, yep. Is this better?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so disclaimer, real quick. The Drupal 7 info in these slides is solid. 100%. I've been doing it for a while. Good to go. The Drupal 8 information, on the other hand, is solid in the sense that I looked it up, brushed up on it last night at around 1 in the morning when I was like, oh, I got to do my slides tomorrow, so your mileage may vary. Also, new concepts in Drupal 8 pertaining to these slides in particular. Drupal 8 was rewritten to use Symfony, or components of the Symfony full stack framework. So you're going to see some MVC stuff, particularly controllers. Basically, a controller is just kind of like a middleman that helps delegate actions, and we'll touch more on it. If you really want a good explanation of MVC, there's a Symfony documentation about taking traditional PHP step-by-step up to Symfony 2, so it's very helpful. Another concept is autoloading and PSR standards. So you're going to see namespaces, autoloading. Basically what that is, in old PHP, you'd have to include files manually. So include once, require once. Autoloading is just basically you don't actually have to include it. If it hasn't already been included, the autoloader will go and grab it for you. So that's what autoloading is. And namespaces is just a way of organizing your code. It's literally just a namespace, like a folder, if you will, kind of, for your code. The last one is Composer and Packages. So Composer is both a command line tool for package management, so think like NPM, bundler, and then it also has its own autoloader. I think Drupal 8, I'm not sure if it uses Composer for autoloading, but anyway, Composer is both package management and an autoloader, and Packagist, the website, is the package repository. So anyway, you're going to see these come up later on. That's what that's all about. Okay, so modules. Modules are the building blocks of Drupal. They can be encapsulated functionality, frameworks, APIs. Very, very, very good stuff. You can do a lot with modules. Why you should write modules. So I said code encapsulation, and that's kind of a developerly word. So it basically just means neatly packaged up. So instead of having your code strewn across multiple directories all throughout your code base, by writing a module, it keeps it in one place. It allows you to enable and disable it, which is great. You can cleanly extend core or other contributed modules. It prevents you from hacking, and hacking in this context just means messing up as opposed to hacking as nefarious entry into other systems. So it prevents you from messing up other people's codes, which preserves the upgrade path. So when somebody else releases new code, you can upgrade it. And one of the big things in Drupal is don't hack core. And there's actually a whole section of documentation dedicated to this, which is linked here. It also allows you to share your code. Again, since it's neatly packaged up, you can upload your module to D.O. People can download it. They can write patches for it. They can extend it. It really is. It's good stuff. I started out trying to hack it with TPL files, but modules are great stuff. So, modules and themes. This is a simplified analysis, but essentially, modules make things work, and you should use themes to make things pretty. Now, developing modules, again, it allows you to keep logic out of your theme layer in your modules. Again, the buzzwords would be separation of concerns, decoupled coding. Again, it's the idea that your theme, you can switch themes and your functionality is still there. Okay, so what makes up a module? Drupal 7 is a lot easier than Drupal 8 because in Drupal 7, it is the minimal parts would be a folder designated by the module machine name. Typically in sites, all modules, I actually do subdirectories. So for example, you could have sites all modules, contrib, development, custom. Drupal's module scanning is recursive, so you can actually throw as many directories under here as you want. So typically sites all modules, dev, the name of your module, an info file, again designated by the machine name, so mymodule.info, and then finally a module file, which is going to contain your bootstrap code. So that's Drupal 7. Drupal 8, again, it's a little bit different. So you've got that module folder. This time, though, you can actually put it in /modules, which is a top-level directory. All the core stuff has been moved to /core/modules, I believe. Again, you can put in your own directories in here. It's recursive. So you've got your module folder. You've also got an info YAML file. YAML, that's something I should have touched on earlier. It's like JSON minus the brackets. So it's just a machine-readable and human-readable kind of key value pair info file. So info YAML file, if you have routes, a routing YAML file, if you're loading in packages from Composer, a Composer JSON file, module file, again, designated by the machine name, and then you're also going to have controller files. Now, those are going to be stored in your module, so it's kind of hard to see here, but that's a /. So you have sites dev mymodule /source/controller, and then the name of the controller.php. So this right here, this source controller name, that's getting into PSR4, which again is that autoloader. So by keeping it consistent, the autoloader knows where in the file path to load that file from. Again, the namespace correlates roughly to the file path. Now that said, if you don't have routes, you're not going to have a YAML file. And if you're not using hooks in Drupal 8, you're not going to actually have a module file. You can use just controllers in your routing file. So it's a little bit weird. You're going to have to, it's not quite as cut and dried. So moving on. Right, deep dive into the info file. So the info file describes your module. At a minimum, it describes name, description, package, type in Drupal 8, and also core version. So the name, again, it's the user-friendly name of your module. This is going to show up in the UI. I think in Drush it actually uses the machine name. But again, this is your user-friendly name of your module. So, for example, my module. The description, again, it's the user-friendly description. You'll see this on the module admin page. So you can, text is a little small here, but it's basically this is my module, which isn't super helpful, but you want to expand it more as you need. Package. So package is the grouping of your module. So when you've got module filter, which is a contrib module, this actually puts tabs on the module admin page. It just allows you to group modules together. So, for example, you could use user interface. It is very sensitive though for spaces, and actually, if you should keep the capitalization the same, because if you don't, it'll actually put two tabs in there, so it gets a little weird. But it's a string, and it allows you to group your modules together. Core is the major version of Drupal that this module is designed for. Note major, so 7.x or 8.x. You don't actually do subversions. It's just the major version. Version is actually the version of the module itself. I mean, by convention, I've seen in Drupal 7, you'd use major version of Drupal core version followed by the version of the module. I saw in Drupal 8 they're actually just doing the version of the module. Another note, this is only to be used when it's not on Drupal.org. When you put your module on Drupal.org, it'll actually add the version for you. So don't fill it out if it's going on D.O. And dependencies. So this is where you list your direct dependencies for your module. When I say direct dependencies, I mean you don't list the dependencies of your dependencies. It'll go ahead and do that for you. So, for example, for D7, we've got array notation kind of here, which is, again, Drupal's own info file format. And D8 is YAML. So here I've got views. I don't list chaos tools. I've got panels, and here I've got rules. So direct dependencies again. So configure is where you can specify a URL or a route in Drupal 8 for your module configuration page. This is really handy if you're on the module admin page, and you can see those little drop downs that say, enable or configure. It's really handy to just have a link right there. So this is how you do it. So in your info file for D7, you just put the direct URL, and then for D8, the name of the route. So this is a little weird, but when we get into routing for D8, you'll see why it looks like this, why you're not actually putting the URL in there. Okay, yeah, Drupal 8, so added a type parameter. This indicates the type of this extension. Info files are used for themes, profiles, and modules. So in D8, you'd indicate what type of extension it is here. So for example, type is module. So here's a quick example info file for D7. Again, it's pretty simple stuff. This is the minimal amount of information. And then the same for Drupal 8. Let me get that out of there. All right, so moving right along, the module file. And then this is going to be pretty heavy on Drupal 7 for the previous mentioned reasons of where module files for Drupal 8 are a little bit different. So module files, particularly in Drupal 7, they are the files that always get loaded for enabled modules. And I stress always because, again, it's procedural. In Drupal 7, if you have 100 modules, you're going to have 100 module files being loaded. So if possible, it should contain the least amount of code. You can actually store code in ink files, and then some hooks will allow you to lazy load ink files. So when we get into this a little bit later, again, you're going to want to keep these module files lean. D8 still uses modules for hooks, or module files for hooks. However, as I mentioned before, routing in particular is no longer done with hook menu. So these module files aren't going to be, they're still going to be used because hooks are used everywhere, but they're not going to be as used. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so the hook system. Again, this is more D7 specific because I haven't had a chance to really dive into D8's hook system. I think it's still the same kind of, that's conjecture. I'm just going to say, haven't had a chance to really dive into it. So when I just explain the hook system, know that this is definitely for Drupal 7. So the hook system is it provides access points to the response cycle in Drupal. It can be used by modules and themes. You can actually have hooks for like pre-processing in your theme. So when you've got output and you want to manipulate it, there's actually theme hooks. The best way to describe it, it's like a roll call. So if, for example, we were to be ordering a pizza, and one of the hooks would be, pre-phone call. So I'm Drupal, you're all modules, you all have this hook called pre-phone call. And I go, hey, what do we want on our pizza? You can all say we want, pepperoni or, God forbid, pineapple. So it's like a roll call. That's all the hook system is. It's just a roll call. It was a little nebulous for me when I was first starting out. Just know that that's all it is. It's a roll call. It allows you to hook in to Drupal's response cycle. In Drupal 7, it's a little funky, but basically what it does is it goes through, and any module that has a function by that hook name, it'll go ahead and run. If you want a simple version of a Drupal-like hook system for D7, I've got a GitHub repo. It's like 2 files. It's a little crazy, but it works and it's procedural. So that's kind of the how. There is an edge case of module files with no hooks. The example I've seen this used for is loading PHP libraries into memory. Because the module file always gets loaded, if you want to load up a PHP library, you can actually create a module for that library, and again, it will load that code into global scope. It won't actually have any hooks, but it'll get loaded for every request. So that's one example. Okay, so obviously breezing through the heavy part of this presentation is going to be the coding. So here's some resources. I can't tell if it's, no, I think that's all of them. So I put the top one as Google, and I love Solr. I love Drupal.org, but I will actually typically use Google to find my answers. That's just the way it is. Module Development Guide is another link, and the D8 module tutorial is actually pretty handy. The 7 one's pretty good too. If you still want to look at a simple like Hello World, this would be your place to go. Drupal.org best practices, again, it's stuff like don't hack core. Again, guidelines when you're getting started to read. The API reference is super helpful, but impossible to navigate. That's where Google comes in. It lists all of the methods and all the functions in Drupal. And again, your modules, they're just going to be calling Drupal's API functions or other API functions. Or you're going to be using this a lot as you get into module development. Drupal Answers is a Stack Exchange site. So it's like Stack Overflow specifically for Drupal. And then there's actually a few Drupal questions on Stack Overflow itself. So that's another one. Moving on. Okay, so again, we're going to get to coding in just a second, but before we do, does anyone have any questions about what we've just covered? Okay, either none of that stuck or all of it stuck, so win-win. So again, I've got on GitHub, and the reason why it's on GitHub is because, again, just for example, instead of having to publish it on D.O, example D7 module, which I actually wrote for last year. So that's why there are 2 separate repos for D7 and D8. I should have branched it. I should have just had example module with the D7 branch, but too late for that now. So D7 will be here, and we've got a D8 one here. And we'll take a look at these actually in just a second. And then finally, if you want to see something that's not trivial, I've got a sandbox project on D.O here. Okay, so now that we've gone through the gist, mainly Drupal 7, let's go ahead and do some coding. So, 1 minute. All right, let's see. Can you still hear me? Okay, with the mic kind of out of my way. Okay, good. I do not want a phone call now. All right, so yeah, I know. Okay, let's try this. Staring me right in the eye. Okay, so right now I've got 2 test sites right now. So this is a D7 test site and then D8 beta 10 test site. So let's look at some code, and we'll actually write one in a second. So let's take a look at D7. So right now I have a example module already coded up. Tell you what though, since it's already done, let's start a new one. Okay, so right now I'm using Sublime. So I'm in my sites, all modules, custom directory. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder called Drupal. No, that's worst idea ever. Pizza. Okay, so pizza, and as we talked about earlier, the minimum parts you need, actually, technically speaking, you need an info file, and that's it, but it's not going to do anything without a module file. So pizza, each all of that. So pizza.info, I think D8 might have scaffolding tools for this, which is awesome. When I say scaffolding tools, you can run a command line command, and it'll do all this stuff for you. Okay, so our info file, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and create a pizza.module file. Okay, so info module file, again, these are the minimum parts. So we are going to need, if I take a look at my own slides, where's the info file? Yeah, okay, so we're going to need name, description, core, package, and version. Okay, so let's do name. Oh man, laptop's quitting out on me. Description. Core. Package, version. And again, we're only using version because we're doing this locally. Right, so I think that's name, description, package, version. Okay, so pizza module is the name. We can just call it pizza. It's kind of redundant. Pizza module. So we're filling out the name, which again is the user-friendly name. This is the description, which is going to show up on the admin page. Core is going to be 7.x because we're on Drupal 7. Package is going to be food. And then version is going to be this, again, when you're local, it can be whatever you want. It's a string, but I'm just going to put 7.x, 1.x. Okay, so let's save it. And actually, right now, so we've created our directory. We've got our info file set up. So let's go ahead and go into our test site. Go to modules. As you get more comfortable with development, I'd actually recommend using Drush. And if you get Dev Desktop, it takes care of all the installation stuff for you. Let me dock this up top. Okay, so if we look under here, so again, this is the package, the grouping that I was talking about. So that's my map module. Here's the food module, or the food grouping. And we can see pizza's already shown up. It's not going to do anything if we enable it. I want to get some hooks in there first. But just know that, again, that's the info file at work right here. So, pizza module. Okay, so even though it's a .module file, it's actually PHP. So we're going to set the correct syntax. Okay, so we need to, we're going to use hook menu. So in Drupal 7, this is weird, just bear with me. So in Drupal 7, hook menu is used for menu links, but also routes. So basically, hook menu is the go-to for creating pages in Drupal 7. So what we're going to do is Drupal 7 hook menu using Google, and you can see the first result is the Drupal API page. So we're going to look at this. So hook menu, I am going to go ahead and just copy and paste this. Actually, you should use code comments and type correctly on the keyboard, which I can't. Okay, so there should be like @file and extends or implement. It's one of the two. Code comments are great. You should really do it actually while I'm at it. Because you may know what you're doing now, but 6 months from now, take it from my experience, you're going to go, what were you thinking? So code comments. And you can, again, in most text editors, you can collapse them if it's hard to parse. So implements hook menu. Oh, yeah, so in the API, wherever you see hook, just replace that with the machine name of your module. So in this case, hook is going to get replaced with, well, they put my module. We're going to put pizza, because that's our module, so hook menu. Okay, so items, hook menu is just a big old array. Drupal 7 loves arrays. Actually, I think Drupal 8 still does. So right now we've got an items array. So each of these key values, or each of these indexes, is going to be the route or the URL for our page. So if we were to put in pizza, this is going to be, slash pizza. That's also a comment in PHP. Okay, so slash pizza in this case, but you don't put the leading slash. So we've got our pizza route, and we want to add in some stuff. Let's go ahead and look at the API docs. So it's got everything listed out. We're going to go ahead and skip towards the bottom because this is where it lists all of the parameters. I'd recommend, if you're new to the specific book, actually reading through. But I know what I'm doing at this point, or your money back. So properties we're going to need, we're definitely going to need page callback. So page callback is going to be the function that Drupal calls to actually process this request. In other words, this is going to be the function that gets us our page content. So pizza page, pizza, yeah, it's fine. Again, Drupal 7 doesn't have any name spacing, so typically, by convention, any function for a module is going to be prefixed by that module's name. So instead of just saying like page or my page, it would be like pizza example page. Okay, so that's the function it's going to call. Actually, I'm gonna peek over here. Okay, so yeah, we're going to use title too, title as well, rather. It's required. So this is going to come up as the title. Shocking. So I am going to go ahead and take a shortcut here. So copy this over. Spaces. Okay, so I'm going to call this the pizza example page. Okay, so now we've got title. We're going to peek again. Page callback, as we talked about earlier, is going to be the function that handles the request. Access arguments. So this is where you set permissions. So the permission system in Drupal is kind of like a true-false. So either the user has this permission or they don't. So this, in this case, access content. So this is weird. This is going to be the permission name, and you'll notice it actually has a space in there. That's because when you're doing hook permission, you actually just use a regular old string. So Drupal hook permission, I think it is. Yeah, so hook permission is how you'd set custom permissions, but we're just going to use the core access content. Yeah, so title will be the human readable name of the permission. And again, in here, you're going to use the title. So in this case, we're going to say anyone who can access content can view this page. File. Okay, so this is what I was talking about with the includes. So here we're going to use the file property. What this says is load the function, or rather load up this file for this route. And again, it'll only load it up when you're on this route, as opposed to if the function were down here, say, that's not a good example. If we're down there, it would always load it up because the module file always gets loaded. So what we're going to need to do, again, by convention, you have an includes directory, and then we're going to create a new file in there. Pizza, again, namespacing it manually. Pizza example, well, we can just go example page.inc. So that's our include file. It's in our includes directory. So here we've got includes, and we're going to call this pizza.example page.inc. So notice that this is relative to the module file, which is going to be in your module folder root. So, okay, I'm going to pop over here one last time. So type, actually I'm going to pop over to the API docs. So there's a couple different types. If we take a look at permission, if we take a look at the API doc, so you can say type. Right, normal item. So it shows up in the menu, as well as it can be a page. There's a couple that is just like callback, local task. I think one of them is just a route as opposed to a menu item. But for right now, we're going to use menu normal item. No, menu callback. Menu callback, that's right. This simply registers a path. It doesn't actually put it in like an admin menu or anything like that. So because we're just creating a page, not creating a menu link, we're going to use menu callback. Okay, so this is pretty much all we need for our module file. Yep, indentation aside, that is pretty much all we need. So I'm going to hit save. Okay, so in here, in our pizza example page inc file, this is again where we're going to render or do whatever we want for this route. In this case, we're just going to render some simple text. So function, because again, here we say what file we're going to load, and then here we're saying what function we're going to call. Drupal 7 function. Pizza example page doesn't take any parameters. So actually, if you use PHP Storm, it'll do it a lot quicker because it'll help you out with code comments and all that. So check out PHP Storm, especially for Drupal 8 once you get into OO. Anyway, this is render handles the pizza route request. Good enough. Okay, so here we're going to do, there's two things you can do. Normally you'd think for page output you'd want to do print or something like that. Since this is hook menu though, we're going to return our output. If you hit print, it's going to skip the theme layer completely. Actually, let's do that. So print pizza, and then later on we'll do return pizza. Yeah, that should do it. I said oh so confidently. Okay, so I'm going to fire up Drush, actually, and drag it over. Actually, no, I haven't enabled it yet. So normally what you have to do when you declare new hooks in your module, you have to clear the cache. But since we haven't enabled the pizza module yet, we shouldn't need to do that. So, okay, so tester. Let's see. So we're going to go ahead and enable it. As it is plugging away. Okay, so good news is we don't see any errors. Well, best news is we don't see a white screen of death. Good news is we don't see any errors, so it looks like everything, at least there shouldn't be any syntax errors in the module or info file, because if there were, they would have showed up here because the module file always gets loaded. So if we go to /pizza, right, so by printing from the function, it actually skips everything else. So we don't want that. So instead, what we have to do is return whatever we want. And again, this is just a simple function. If you get into the form API, you can start building forms out and then you return the form. But for right now, we're just going to do return pizza. And then if we reload the page, you can see pizza example page and the body text is pizza. Okay, so that is a very simple module. Again, from here in Drupal 7, it's just a matter of looking at the hooks, looking at the APIs and calling them accordingly. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and do some Drupal 8. Does anyone have any questions on the D7 stuff? Yes, sir. You know, that's I don't know off the top of my head. I actually haven't ever done it that way, so that is a good question. So let's, I've only got 10 minutes left, so unfortunately I don't know off the top of my head, but that's a good question. If we take a look at the docs real quick, though. Access arguments to pass with, it's not super helpful, actually. Not sure off the top of my head. Any other questions for D7? Okay, I'm going to go ahead, since again we've only got like 10 minutes left, I'm going to go ahead and move over to D8. Okay, so let's, I'm going to close this out. And again, on GitHub, there's the example repos with step-by-step commits. So here's D8. And can I do this? Yeah, I can do this in 10 minutes. Okay, so I've got my own, again, this time we're in the doc root, the top-level modules directory, which is different from D7. So top-level modules directory, I put a custom folder in there for myself. And now we're going to create, you guessed it, pizza. I was going to go with Drupal, but that one was taken. So in D7, or D8, so we need a info file for sure. So pizza.info.yml. I've seen it use .yaml and .yml. I think Drupal's going with .yml, but I've also seen it .yaml. So we've got our info file. While I'm creating stuff, I'm actually going to go ahead and just pizza.routing.yml. And then we're going to have a controller. So source, which is, you'll notice that most Symfony projects are auto PSR. It's probably a PSR spec for auto loading the source directory. So source control. It's either, I think it's controller, not controllers. Controller within the source directory, and then finally we're going to have a pizza control. Or, no, let's call it example page controller.php, which is quite verbose, but that's okay. Yeah, it's controller. Okay, so this is the minimum parts of what we're going to need. And again, in this example, we're just printing something out as a route. We're just creating a page. So info file. I most certainly did. Thank you very much. So it has an R, everybody. So learn something new every day. Okay, so now that we've got the correct file names and the base files that we need, let's go ahead and fill out the info file, which again is going to look, the properties are going to be pretty much the same. For time's sake, I'm going to just paste it over and then explain them. Again, name is going to be the name of the module. Pizza, it's a module, so I'm going to drop that off. This is description, so this is the pizza module. It's a type module. We're using 8.x. We're going to be in the food package, and then finally this is the first version. So info YAML file. Again, it's like JSON except no brackets or anything like that. Okay, so that's the info file. And actually, if we take a look at our admin page, so in Drupal 8, it's called extend. This would be the module page. I don't have module filter. I think there's, I'm not sure if there's an 8x release for module filter yet, but we'll go to our module page. So if we scroll down, food should be in here. Right, so we have our food package, which is our grouping. So this is the pizza module. Excuse me. So this is the pizza module. Again, right now, I mean, it does nothing, but that's technically the minimum parts you need. So let's go ahead and actually do something with it. Okay, so this is where Drupal 8 gets way different from Drupal 7. Routing, and when I say routing, I mean, you know, for a certain URL or path, do this. So URL being route. Routing is handled like Symfony, so you're actually going to put it in a .yaml file, not hook menu. Hook menu is only used for menu links now, which makes more sense to me anyway. Again, for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just use my example. But in this case, so we're going to namespace it. So pizza dot example page. And when I got on the configure for the info file, you remember the configure in the slides. So if we look at configure somewhere in here, package, core, description, no, it's got to be down. version, dependencies, configure, yeah. So in Drupal 7, we use the route. Here in Drupal 8, we're using the route, or Drupal 7, we're using the URL. Drupal 8, we're using the route name. So that's where this comes in. So you'll notice this is pizza example page. So if you were doing a configure thing, you'd use this, which is the route name. So path is going to be the URL. So pizza. Defaults. Okay, so it's starting to get a little weird, but here we're going to specify the controller. So again, the controller is going to be, it's going to extend its OO, but it's essentially going to be the function responsible for handling this request. In our case, putting the output to the screen. So here we've got this big old notation. This is the namespace, which again pretty much correlates to the directory structure for auto-loading. So in this case, Drupal, because everything is under the Drupal namespace for us. Pizza is our module, controller, which is again controller, and then we called it example page controller. That's, you know what, I'm gonna dread typing that out, so let's just call that page controller, which I know, but so we're gonna call it page controller. So page controller, and then this double colon here, that's it allows you to statically call stuff, or in this case, in Symfony, it allows you to on demand call that controller, because again, it's OO once we get into it. So what it's saying is only load this when the route is needed. So I forget the actual name for the double colon, but in PHP terms, that's statically calling something. And then the content function of this controller. And I'm pretty sure that this is a convention too for Drupal 8, is that using content. So title is pizza page. And again, we've got permission access content. Okay, so this is our routing YAML file. So let's go ahead over to our page controller. And again, for your sake and mine, I'm just going to pop this over and walk through it. Okay, so what we've got here, again, our code comments. We've got pizza, and one last time, PHP Storm, you got to pay for it, but it's great because it'll help out with all this kind of code commenting and comment completion and all that stuff. I think we called it page controller. Okay, so contains page controller. The namespace would be pizza controller. And again, this is just a logical grouping for code. It allows you to say, so instead of having the function or class name being, you know, Drupal or some really long thing, namespaces allow you to just, again, group code logically. And for auto-loading, it's going to correlate roughly to the directory structure so it can grab it on demand. Here, we're going to use this use keyword in PHP, that's shorthand. That's just saying wherever I say controller base in my code, I'm actually going to use the Drupal core controller base. So this allows you to alias the namespace. So in this case, instead of using the fully qualified namespace, you're just going to use controller base. So wherever you see use, that's, again, just aliasing stuff. And then the namespace at the top is going to be the namespace for this file. Okay, so class, page controller, which even though that sounds generic, because we're in our pizza namespace, we shouldn't have any conflicts. I've got 1 minute. All right, let's do this. So extends controller base. So again, OO. This basically says Drupal controller base. By extending it, it allows it to inherit stuff. I don't really have time to go into the specifics of it, but again, it allows you to keep code reuse up. So you can write a base class, extend from it. So here we've got our content function. We've got a renderable array. In this case, we've got markup, and in markup, we've got pizza page. Okay, let's save that, enable it, and fingers crossed I didn't miss any other spellings. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so we're going to enable it and hit save. And again, you could do this with Drush. Drush is actually very helpful. So it's thinking, down to the wire. Okay, so it didn't blow up. That's good. So if we go to /pizza, pizza page, yay! Okay, well, again, we're at 12 o'clock, so I'm sure everyone wants to eat now. But it's on GitHub. The slides have already been posted, and they're on the website. So if you have any questions, you check out GitHub or talk to me later. Thank you, everyone.